Hello and welcome to Civil War Digital Digest. I'm Andy, and today we're doing an episode from my office in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. It didn't work out for Will and I to meet in person, but this is an episode that we wanted to get out relatively soon, so we decided to film it this way. Today I want to talk about a new biography from the Michigan Civil War Association written by Jack Dempsey called His Sword, a Scalpel. And it's the biography of Brevet Brigadier General Charles Tripler, who's most famous for serving as the medical director of the Army of the Potomac from immediately after the disaster of Bull Run through the 7 Days Campaign, the Peninsula Campaign of 1862. I think this is an important book for us to talk about, not only because it just came out in November of 2023, but it's a great complement to another book we've talked about here on the show, another book from the Michigan Civil War Association, Heart and Tethers. That book is actually the journals of Dr. Tripler's wife, Eunice. So now we have the primary sources of her journals that are published, as well as now Dr. Tripler's biography itself. Dr. Charles Tripler is a very interesting man in terms of, a lot of times we talk about the Civil War, we talk about generals, we talk about politicians, even a lot of times we talk about individual soldiers. But not only is Dr. Tripler a surgeon, an Army surgeon, and a very well-known one in the United States at this point too, but I think it's fascinating because he is a medical director and has so much to do with the establishment of the structure of the medical department of the Army of the Potomac, which of course went out to the other armies, as the Army of the Potomac in so many ways was the place where experiments were done. What he did there was widely used by other armies throughout the United States during the Civil War. So Dr. Charles Tripler was born in 1806 in New York City to a relatively affluent family. The family ended up going on hard times, and he ended up joining the medical school from Columbia University. And then immediately after he graduated, he took a position as assistant surgeon in the U.S. Army in the late 1820s. So Dr. Tripler was actually in his 50s by the time the Civil War broke out, but he had an extensive career. He had fought in the Seminole War. He had been a division surgeon during the Mexican War and was a founding member of the Aztec Club, the organization of former Army officers that had been on the campaign to Mexico City. He had been involved with the American Medical Association, the AMA, which was in its nascent period in the 1850s. And he was actually a widely known surgeon, not just within the Army, but within the entire medical community in the United States. It's interesting because this is a period where doctors, some are college educated, some go through an apprenticeship model. There's still a difference between a physician and a surgeon. And Dr. Tripler not only went to a real medical school, he had wide experience in surgery. The book talks about periods in the 1850s where he's doing surgery in Ohio, and students from medical schools are coming to watch the surgery. And it's interesting to see the way that he was on the cutting edge of medical development in this period, which helps explains that when the Civil War came along, why he was selected to be the medical director of the Army of the Potomac immediately in the aftermath of the Battle of Bull Run. And that's the heart of this book, is Dr. Tripler trying to deal with the confusion after that battle, trying to deal with this massive volunteer army coming together, and trying to deal with the tiny organization of the U.S. Army Medical Department to see it grow, to make sure that the surgeons, the medical professionals coming in were qualified, making sure the recruits coming in the Army were qualified, and of course, creating a structure that would not only work to ensure the health and welfare of the men in camp, but also on campaign and in battle. A lot of the innovations that we see later in the war that get brought to full fruition by Dr. Letterman, who was the medical director in the Army of the Potomac after him, and especially during the Battle of Gettysburg, you can see where those begin during Dr. Tripler's period in charge of the Army of the Potomac's medical service, including creating brigade medical organizations, division medical organizations, creating the ambulance corps, making sure it was properly staffed, equipped, really getting General McClellan on board to make sure that the medical department was properly supplied, that was integrated in the commissary department, the quartermaster department for transportation. It's interesting the way we've talked previously here on the show. And we've had an episode on the regimental staff as well as an episode on brigade and higher staffs. And we talked about medical directors, surgeons. And one of the really fascinating things going in the Civil War is the highest rank a medical officer could be in the Army was a surgeon, which is the equivalent of a major. even the Surgeon General of the U.S. Army is still a major. So this entire time that he's medical director of the Army, Dr. Tripler is a major. Now, in the summer of 1862, the Army recognized that there had to be more ranks, and there's interesting discussion about why Tripler didn't end up getting one of these colonel ranks. He did later in the war become a brevet brigadier general, and that's the rank he held when he died immediately after the war. One of the hallmarks that Jack Dempsey talks about in this book of Tripler's tenure in the Army of the Potomac is the relationship with the civilian organization, the U.S. Sanitary Commission. It was a private organization created at the behest of the U.S. government to be a partner to the Army War Department in order to care for soldiers. But over a period of time, Tripler's relationship with this group became particularly acrimonious, especially with his counterpart, Frederick Law Olmsted. You know, it's interesting because Olmsted's a name that we don't generally associate with the Civil War. You know, he went on after the war to do so many other things. You know, he's a famed architect and urban planner. He was involved with designing Central Park in New York City, here in Detroit, Belle Isle, which is a large island as a park. He worked on the gardens for the Biltmore Estate for the Vanderbilts in North Carolina. He did gardens for the U.S. Capitol building. He helped design the campus on the University of California, Berkeley. And then he helped do the design for the site for the World Columbian Exposition, 1893 in Chicago. You know, it was a varied career, but this was just the beginning of it. You know, he was working with this philanthropic organization. He went into the field with the Army of the Potomac, and just him and Tripler did not hit it off well together. And their relationship defined a lot of Tripler's future with the Army. You know, eventually that would lead to Dr. Tripler's downfall, but it's interesting to see in this book the back and forth, two organizations that are both trying to do the right thing by soldiers, but often going about it in different ways, and not, because of it, not seeing eye to eye. Certainly some lessons that we can all see today. One of the things I really love is the wide variety of sources that come into it that are quoted at length, not just diaries, but reports, newspaper articles, letters. Dempsey does a great job of building his case as he talks about things, of including lots of voices in the narrative, where it's not just Tripler talking. It's a lot of different people talking about him, talking about the subjects. And he does a good job explaining things that the average reader might not understand about medical things, about how Civil War hospitals and armies are organized. And I think it does a good job of reaching out to more than the experienced Civil War reader or, you know, the academic historian. It's a very approachable book. And for me, I like it because, you know, Tripler is very connected to my hometown. He's not from Detroit, but he became a Detroiter. This is where he married. This is where he lived. This is where he died. And this, you know, it became very much an interesting connection to Michigan's role in the Civil War. One of Tripler's big things after he leaves the Army of the Potomac is helping to set up those hospitals that today we would consider, you know, recuperative hospitals where men can go to be rehabilitated, be closer to home, where, of course, soldiers are going to heal better when they can be closer to home, be visited by family, with the ultimate goal of either successfully transitioning them back to military life, or if they're still able to return to service, getting them back to their unit and back into their fight faster. Ultimately, I thought it was a good read. If you get a chance, go check it out. You know, we'll put a link here so you can go through our website to find it. And of course, the proceeds from this book are going to go help the Michigan Civil War Association's drive to put a Michigan monument on the Antietam battlefield. You know, it's one of their big goal right now. They have the land put aside for it. They're trying to get the money together to actually get the monument up on the battlefield. And getting this book would be a way to help them out just a little bit. We try to cover a lot of different topics here on the show, and going and finding a good book and a subject that's maybe not quite, you know, the norm for our viewers, I think is an important part of this. Take the time, go read it, find out something different about the war, and I think you'll enjoy it. So for Civil War Digital Digest, I'm Andy, and we'll catch you next time.